All right. Mic check 1 2 1 2. Mic check 1 2 1 2. If anyone in the chat can hear me, just push 1. People are saying they can't hear me. Make some adjustments real quick. They can't hear me. All right. Can anyone hear me now? Okay, so somebody can hear me. I'm not sure what's going on. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Push 1 in the chat if you can hear me. Yeah, you got this guy in the chat named Wayne Brady saying, I can't hear you. And then, you got other people saying, yeah, I can hear you. And then he says, nope, still can't hear you. Crazy. All right, man, let me just get started, man. Let me just throw the joint up on here real quick.
Yeah. Yo, the time the plane leaving? All right. See you at the airport. I'm leaving on the next plane. I don't know when I'll be back again. Kiss me and smile for me. Tell me that you wait for me. Hold me like you know I'll never go. Even though you know I will, I'm a traveling man. Moving through places and time. Got a lot of things I got to do. God willing, I'm coming back to you. Baby boo, I'm a traveling man. Moving through places, space and time. Got a lot of things I got to do. God willing, I'm coming back to you. Baby boo, I'm leaving. Go ahead and leave the call. Heard around the world from the wise of MCs. These cats is paying more than half a pound. I'm going back and snatch it down. I got to skate, but we can probably run a back in town. Scenarios like this is tear jerkers for the modern MC. I eat the blue collar worker cause this thing called rhyming no different from coal mining. We both on assignment to unearth the diamond. When you start climbing and them eyes start shining, you be struggling and striving and they think you prime time and maintain and keep silent. Make no an observation. It's confrontation. This is the daily operation. My concentration. Stay focused on my recitation. About to reach my destination with no pause or hesitation. Baby, make the preparation cause this ain't no recreation. This is pro ball and we letting you know y'all. Show y'all doing this for dough y'all. Get the phone call and I'm ready to blow y'all. About to go y'all. Been a pleasure to know y'all. And I'm letting you know I'm leaving on a jet plane. I don't know if I'll be back again. Kiss me and smile for me. Tell me that you wait for me. Hold me like you know I'll never go. Even though you know I will, I'm a traveling man. Moving through places, space and time. Got a lot of things I got to do. But inshallah, I'm coming back to you. Baby boy, I'm a traveling man. Moving through places, space and time. Got a lot of things I got to do. But inshallah, I'm coming back to you. Baby boo, I'm leaving. But God willing, I'll be back home to drop these heavy ass bags up my backbone. Around the world with the catalog of rap songs. My baby girl is walking, been away for that long. But no, you haven't, well, at least it's how it seemed to me. My hometown is like a whole different scenery. The old timers on the stoop, leaning leisurely. The new jacks up in the park, smoking greenery. Easily taken for granted when you up in it, but it's sweet sinning. When you get down for a minute, move around city limits, breaking down with the finish. The end no finish, classical b-boy image. Collect the winners, cause that's the reason that we came here. This thing is not a game here, the fortune, not the fame here. From New York to the Cadillacs, Cali in the Cadillac, Chicago, no we innovate. Infiltrate Virginia State, DC make me stimulate. Philly, no we penetrate. Georgia make us generate. Let's set a date to get the pace. They celebrate on my jams in foreign lands. Even your mans in Japan know who I am. And I son, make everybody out in the fun. Say Ichiban, make that man know where you get it from. Phenomenon, excuse me, that's a phone call. It's a show, y'all. Trying to get this dough, y'all. About to blow, y'all. Been a pleasure to know y'all. And I'm letting you know I'm leaving on a jet plane. I don't know if I'll be back again. Kiss me and smile for me. Tell me that you wait for me. Hold me like you know I'll never go. Even though you know I will, I'm a traveling man. Moving through places, space and time. I got a lot of things I got to do. But inshallah, I'm coming back to you. Baby boo, I'm a traveling man. Moving through places, space and time. Got a lot of things I got to do. God willing, I'm coming back to you. Back to you, I'm leaving. Over the world we go, the Cadillacs all over the world we go, London all over the world we go, Japan we go, over the world we go, Paris we go, over the world we go.
All right, man. Let me shout out people in the chat before we get started. Big Poke Dog, salute. Wayne Brady, what's going on? The Knowledge Consumer, what's going on? Faber, good evening. Don Man, what's up? Maddox 12, what's going on? Motor City Red, what's up? Rainy Woman, good evening to you, as always. Zone, what's going on? Favor, keep it techie. So yeah, man. I think we chop it up for about an hour or so, man. And I know a lot of people had questions and whatnot about some of the intricate details on the ground and whatnot. So beyond the conference itself, because the conference was the main objective, but what was the nuances on the ground. And so for me, let me make this adjustment real quick. For me, my interest in the continent, man, was to be around like-minded individuals who had a purpose. And what I found when I got over there was that there were people over there who had similar visions, even though they came from different parts of the continent and different parts of the US. They had similar visions. And so there's a lot of progressiveness that was going on within the conference and beyond the conference. So even after the conference was over, people were still linking up, sharing business cards and business contacts and LinkedIns and whatnot. And so things were copacetic for all intents and purposes. I haven't had any problems with anybody. No one's had any problems with me. I haven't heard anything blowing up. I think that the conference served its purpose. The conference served its purpose. I think it was mission completed. And so because of that, I encourage a lot of people to actually go over there, man. If you get the opportunity, man, go over there. Check it out for yourself. If you don't believe me. You don't believe me, you can go over there for yourself and find out. Why do we have so few people liking the stream? I don't get that. Got 30 people watching, but only got 10 likes. But to the point, back to the point, yeah, things were popping, man. Actually, let me get some water real quick. Yeah, sorry about that. I think it was, like I said before, mission complete. A lot of people are asking, what it was like. I think there was some intricate questions that were being proposed to me, and I was, waiting to do this live stream just so we can actually chop up some game on here. And so what are the things that you should actually look out for? When you get to Rwanda, you're gonna have to pay a $50 up front before you can leave the arrivals area. They're gonna screen you for coronavirus as usual. But once you get to the booth, you're gonna pay $50 up front for a visa. The visa is good for 30 days. Even if you're only there for 1 day or 2 days, it's good for 30 days. Anything longer than 30 days, you're gonna pay more for a visa. So make sure you bring cash, because there's no credit accepted, from my understanding. So you have to come up with cash. And so make sure if you're gonna go there, bring at least $500. You're gonna pay for taxis up front, but you need to find somebody who you feel is going to be reliable enough to take you to the place that you need to go to. To go from the airport to the hotel, no matter where you are, it's going to be $20. That's just the nature of how they calculate fare. $20 from the airport to your hotel, and then after that, other places it's going to be $10, $5, for a car, a taxi. Motorcycle taxis is actually surprisingly cheap. 50 cents, 75 cents to get around, to have a motorcycle taxi take you around. So you're actually going to come out pretty well if you just map out where you want to go instead of just going random places. You can walk to certain places, but you can't get around to further places without a car because there's no sidewalks. And then you won't be able to actually traverse the traffic without actually having a vehicle. So that's a that's a consideration. However, hotels depends on the time that it's happening. I saw good hotels, like the one I had was like 30 to 40 bucks. It was a penthouse suite. If you try to book at the very last minute, that price could shoot up 80, 90, $100 for a room. That's just the way it is. Because depending on what's happening at the time, I had to book my room at the very last minute because my passport has some issues, so I had to wait for it. Now, I didn't want to book a room or book a trip without the passport being shipped to me. So that's that. You get on the ground. I would advise, man, it depends on what you're going there for. If you're going there for leisure, then yeah, you can dress the way you want. I would say keep it toned, keep the dress code kind of toned down. Walking around with big colorful Nikes and stuff like that, you're gonna stick out like a sore thumb. You don't blend in very well. O'Shea Duke Jackson, what's up, man? Other things, man. Don't assume that if a dude is looking at you, he wants to fight you. No, he's just looking at you because you're foreign to the country. O'Shea, I went to Rwanda. I went to Kigali. So that's what I'm referring to. Smooth Vision, he says you get robbed if you do that. I wouldn't say you get robbed, at least not in Rwanda. I don't know of anybody who gotten robbed up there. Like I said last night, I left my laptop out there for 90 minutes and nobody touched it. Nobody touched it. So, my understanding is that they take thievery very seriously. I was in the hood in Kigali walking around and nobody robbed me. Nobody stepped to me or anything like that. If anything, most of those dudes try to help me navigate. I was walking around, they didn't say nothing. The trip. So The trip was like 6 hours to from the U.S. to Istanbul, and then from Istanbul um, to Kigali was like another, I think, like 4 hours, like a 4 hour trip. But the in my experience, man, Turkish Airlines is terrible, man. The seats were horrible, absolutely horrible. My legs were killing me, my glutes were killing me. But Airways, much better. The quality of the seats were better, the service was better. It was just a better experience. So I would definitely book Qatar Airways next time around to be direct. Yep. No, I'm not. I'm not there now. Smooth Vision, not there now. Yeah, O'Shea. Yeah, Qatar is the joint, man. That is the joint. Yeah, it's the joint. Yeah, Uganda is next for me, man. Yeah, Uganda is next, man. Uganda, Kenya, um, both of those are on the list. Not maybe not this year, but this time next year it will be on the list. Um, I'm looking at South Africa as next month. Oh, he said, how much did the flight cost? The whole package was 1,700 with the hotel. With the hotel, it's 1,700. Enigma Incorporated piece. What was the weather like? It was like 60 degrees when I got there. At nighttime, it was like 55. In the daytime, it got up to 80 degrees. But I never sweated. I never felt like I was sweating. There was, most people I saw walking around, they weren't sweating. So it really wasn't that bad. Um, yeah, O'Shea, it was a good deal. It was a 4 star too. I could have went for the 5 star, but I could have went for the 5 star, but I didn't think it was worth it. The price difference wasn't worth it. The 4 star was just fine. As a matter of fact, most of the brothers that I had met there, they were actually in the 4 star, the same as one as mine. I stayed in the 2000 hotel. Engineering Cannabis asked, where is the next conference going to be held? It's going to be held in South Africa. So that one is going to be in March for the blockchain conference. Let me share my screen real quick. Okay, here we go. Yeah, so if you can see my screen, this is the event, Blockchain Africa Conference. So I'll be definitely going to that. Oh, Zoe Royalty asked a question. He said, You saw the technological potential of Africa. Yeah, so I did. There's a lot of intellectual capacity um, at that event. There was a lot of it. There was a lot of it. You're talking billions of dollars in just intellectual property being spilled out in that event. So there was very good, very well thought out perspectives being pushed out there that I think a lot of people don't really know. Don't realize that these were Africans talking like this. These weren't Black Americans. They were actually Africans having some really deep conversations about the trajectory of fourth industrialization for the continent. From what you saw from the ground, what is, I guess, what do you project the future of Africa will be? So you can only make these 10-year projections. And the 10-year projection is that the traditional work method of the first, second, and third industrial revolution is going to be radically different for fourth industrialization, because the idea of getting up and going to work and doing a 9-to-5 job is not going to be that. It's going to be different. It's going to be vastly different. The gig economy is already in full effect, right? So you have to take into consideration that your skill set is going to determine where you land in this new industrialization. And so what you see now is a lot of the Africans that I've met are really coders. They're not really talking about desktop computing and networks, network engineering. They're talking about high level code writing, high level software architecture, software development. That's what they're talking about. And so they're trying to push the culture of cultivating people to be fluent in some form of language, some form of programming language, as well as pushing for startup culture. And let's say a startup is functional for let's say 1 to 5 years. That's actually relatively good. And then the startup maybe gets acquired by another company, or it shuts down because it reached its goal. It hit its life expectancy. Most businesses fail within its first year. If you can get a startup in Africa to function for 5 years and produce results, that's actually fairly good. It's actually fairly good. So that's what they're thinking, Zoe. They're thinking that the traditional way of working is not going to be the same. Everybody's going to have some form of skill set to bargain with. And if you don't have a skill set, you're going to find yourself in a sort of cyclical loop of not being employed in high vertical markets. And the vertical markets are all fourth industrial based. But I think this impacts more of ADOS people or FBA, Foundational Black Americans, more so than the continent, because they have a different sort of demographic than, let's say, Black Americans do. And so their demographic is all under 30, the majority, right? And Sub-Saharan is mostly under 30. So Generation Y, Generation Z, the Zennials, those are going to be the ones to really carry the continent forward, not so much about the the Gen Xers and the Boomers. They're not even a perspective anymore. The millennials, will be the seniors of the 10-year movement, but the ones that are going to carry the weight the most are going to be the Ys and the Zennials, the Generation Zs, because they're so fluent in the marketing technology that they just pick up items and they kind of figure it out. It's almost second nature for them to actually just pick up an item and figure it out. So I know another question was, what does it cost for an apartment, right? So a typical 200, 300, 400 square foot apartment And NYC can cost you $1,800 at best. When you talk about over there, translated into their money, then you're talking about 90 to 100 to $120 a month for the same apartment. When I was there, I didn't see any roaches in people's houses, to my knowledge. I didn't see any of it. I didn't see any rats. People really keep their stuff really, really tight and clean. It's surprisingly enough, as poor as developing as the state was, you would think you were in a first world country because of how they kept it. They really kept it up. Roscoe asked, what are your thoughts on the relationship between China and Africa? Africans had to go somewhere. The US did not do a good job at investing into the continent, and the Europeans didn't either. They kind of extracted all the resources that they could from the continent and kept them actually in a subordinate state. And that was not a good that wasn't a good choice on their behalf. Their perspective on about Africans or melanated people is a very racist one. It's a very aggressive racist perspective. It's always about melanated people being subordinate. So the same way they treat Black people in America, they kind of have the same foreign policy for Africans as well. And I think that's what creates that sort of distant bonding for Black people in America and Black people in the continent. That's what creates kind of the Pan-Africanist movement, because you see the same sort of policies being driven down the throats of Black Americans, and then you see the same sort of foreign policy being projected onto Latin America as well as the continent of Africa as well. That's what kind of bonds them together. And so they don't have any choice but to go to China. They don't have any other choice. I mean, are Chinese people, are Asian people over there? Yeah, they are. I saw a lot more Asian women than I saw Asian men over there. I didn't see a whole lot of, Asian men running around Rwanda, knocking up females. I didn't see that. So maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. I haven't seen it myself, so I can't comment on that. But the nation state of China in relation to the continent, so you really don't have any other choice for an investment standpoint other than, Chinese money coming in, South Korean money coming in, Japanese money coming in. I mean, where else are you going to get it from? Do you think China is getting too much in return for the money it is investing? I don't know, because we don't really know all the details as to what kind of contractual stipulations were made. We don't know. All we know is that, China has pumped a lot of money into the continent, but people are saying, well, they're extracting all these resources. Well, the Europeans were doing that too, and nobody seemed to have a problem with that. No one seemed to have a problem with that. So I didn't see a whole lot of Chinese people, running around Rwanda. I didn't see it. There were more white people there, if anything, but most of the white people I saw were there for the tourism. They were really going to the safari areas of Rwanda. They weren't really, and you don't feel the racism, right? You don't really feel white people trying to project their privilege over you. To me, they kind of just put their backpack on and they're gone. Like they're there 1 second, then they're gone the next second. So I didn't really see any of that. But is China getting too much in return for the money it is investing? I don't know. It is yet to be seen. It has yet to be seen. I think African leadership is maybe looking at it from a perspective like quid pro quo, right? But how they should be managing the natural resources is that they should be setting up state-based firms to extract those resources and get a better profitization from it. right? Russia has Roscom and Rosneft and Luke Oil. Those are all state-run organizations. They're companies that do business abroad, but they're actually state-run, and that's the way Africans should actually run their natural resources. They should actually run it just like that. I don't know if they're actually going to do it or what the plans are, but that's how it should be run, and that's how you kind of protect yourself from exploitation. So yeah, an apartment, man, is anywhere between 90 to 120 bucks a month, for the equivalent cubic footage of what you would get inside New York City or New Jersey or something like that. Car wise, I saw a lot of European vehicles up in there, Mercedes and Volkswagen and stuff like that. Fairly modern ones too, fairly modern. So my understanding is that you have to pay a 20% excise tax or whatever the taxation is that Rwanda has on vehicles, 20% of the MSRP. So that's what you're going to be paying. So if you want to import a vehicle, that's what you're going to have to pay. So you want to import a Lamborghini. Why would you want to import a Lamborghini to that country? I don't know. You really need someone that's going to service it because although the roads are clean, not all of them, the roads weren't really designed for hyperscale cars like that. It's really designed for city cars, like Honda Fits and Honda Civics and stuff like that. Really cars that can, park in small spaces and stuff like that because there's so many other vehicles running around. It's just not a whole lot of space to park your vehicle. Yeah, I didn't know O'Shea was over there in Uganda. I actually met somebody who was on their way from Rwanda to Uganda. So there seems to be a close relationship between the two countries in terms of how people migrate back and forth. Yeah, I'd be interested to know what O'Shea paid for his package to get to Uganda. But here's my experience in doing all of that, being over there. If you have a really tight game plan, you can actually do fairly well on the ground over there. When we were chopping up game about startups and doing business, there was a lot of open arms and welcoming from those people on the ground. They were saying, hey, if it's a great idea that you have, Mike, let's exchange contacts, let's do something. A lot of Nigerians were there. I would say the majority of the people who showed up to the event were actually Nigerian. So, and it was more, it wasn't just Rwandans there. It was actually a whole lot of Africans there. Some people from Uganda, some people from, a lot of people from Nigeria, some people from Ghana. A lot of South Africans were there. They were there deep. Kenyans were there. Ethiopians were there. Egyptians were there. Who else was representing up in there? Cameroonians were there. It was a big event, man. It was really dope. It was really dope. So well worth it. And so what I've learned is that when Black Americans showed up, we kind of moved, into the room because people were asking, where are you from, and this, and that. And the Black people who were from America who came there, maybe about 6, 7, 8 of us, it was like, oh, so y'all were from the West, and it was like, yeah. And then, slowly but surely, we were chopping up game, and it was like, maybe we can launch our own startup here. We got the intellectual power, the human capital. Let's do it. And so that's where the discussions about sharing business contacts and business cards and stuff like that came about. Um, Roscoe, hey Sister George, how are you doing? Um, Roscoe asks if you had a chance to advise the governments of different African countries, what would you suggest they do to take control of and get the most of their natural resources? So that's interesting because it depends on the natural resource. If it's oil, oil is not going to be really sustainable, especially with EVs coming on board. After 2040, that could really start to have an impact on them. It could have a boomerang effect because the demand for oil is actually starting to go down. It's not starting to go. It's not going to go up. It's going to go down, especially with all these Paris climate change agreements and stuff like that, where they're trying to reduce the amount of consumption on for fuel and stuff like that, fossil fuels. You're starting to see less and less. If you look at the barrels per day that are being consumed by client states, you're starting to see less and less and less of that demand. The demand is starting to drop, and over the next 20 years, it's going to drop significantly. And so Africans have to start looking at how they manage their resources in conjunction to their nation state currency. Cryptocurrencies was highly, highly talked about at this event. How do how does the continent benefit from cryptocurrencies, and how are you going to tie that in with resources? That's what needs to be done, tying the resources into digital currencies so that you get faster payments, so that you get more value, more bang for your buck. And so that hasn't really been figured out yet because you have regulatory frameworks and compliance pieces that need to be added and so on and so forth. Steel, aluminum, iron ore, rubber, things like that. Those are things that are going to be around for the next 100 years. The demand for that is not going to go away. That's not going to go away at all. Oil, on the other hand, may be a bigger problem for them. Natural gas, different, because natural gas can actually provide energy to prospective homes and manufacturing facilities. You can run a whole country off of natural gas. Algeria does that right now. They've been doing that for quite some time, and actually they make a lot of money off of that. What type of other sector of business do they have besides mining natural resources and technology related? That's interesting because mining of the natural resources is what nation states do. They extract from their own. So tourism is another big thing for them. I'm pretty sure that makes up 1/3 of their revenue from a GDP standpoint. However, that's pretty much every country. They all do the same thing. They capitalize off of their environment. From a tourism perspective. Let me step away for 1 second.
Can you all hear me?
I,
Hello? Can y'all hear me?
yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, Mike. Mike, we couldn't hear you for about 5 minutes.
Yeah, I said I was good. I said I was gonna step away.
Oh, oh. We didn't hear you say that. Sorry.
Yeah,
Okay, everyone. He'll be right back.
no, I'm already here.
Okay, everyone, he's back.
Yeah. So one of the big takeaways from that event was what the brother that said from Microsoft, that there needs to be more synergy between African Americans and Africans in terms of fourth industrialization. And so a lot of people don't really realize that Black people coming from the West, from a first world power, some of the education background that they have, and some of the ideas that they may be bringing can actually slot in, right? So you can take bits and pieces of what everybody knows, and you can kind of put something together on the whiteboard. Business modeling, economic modeling, cultural modeling, academic modeling. So we have to look at this from a broader perspective rather than to just be looking at it as, well, they don't like you though, right? I haven't had that experience. Everybody that I met, 100% positive engagement with them. Come back to the continent. When you coming back, Mike? This, and that. I said, I'll be back all year round. Every season I'm coming back. Every season. Enigma asks, what are the top lucrative startup businesses in Africa? That's a good question because it depends on what region you're in and what state you're going to be in. But what I've noticed in Rwanda is a lot of that is revolving around service development. So startups, if you could develop a Lyft alternative, Uber alternative, Uber Eats, and so on and so forth, that's going to be huge. Because everybody who has a vehicle is using their vehicle as a taxi at some point. I don't care what time of day it is or how many times they use it. They're using it as a transportation service. And so if you can come up with different sort of apps that service sectors, that's going to determine, the value of your startup. So startup talk was really, really, really big. I mean, you talked about it every single day. They talked about it 2 or 3 times a day. And one of the things that, and engineering cannabis is hitting on the head, fintech, agriculture, AI. Yeah, all of that stuff is really big. All of that stuff is really big. If you know AI, you know fintech, you know blockchain, you know cloud, you know agricultural, agritech is what they call it. You're really valuable. You're a MVP over there. And so that's what they look at. We talk about all of this stuff on the channel every single week. And a lot of the stuff that we were talking about on this channel, they were talking about at the conference. So don't think for a second that, people aren't paying attention. So yeah, man, planning your destination out a week of time is actually pretty sufficient if you plan it out correctly on what you're trying to do. You don't want to waste too much time just lingering around. You want to actually keep it moving. Every single opportunity, keep it moving. Like I said, motorcycle taxis anywhere between 50 to 75 cents a ride versus a car. A car is going to cost you anywhere between $5 and $10 to go to your next destination. To get to the airport from anywhere, it's going to be $20. To get from the airport to your hotel, it's going to be $20. So expect to bring that. You're going to spend $100 on just taxiing around. And make sure you find yourself a dedicated taxi driver, and download WhatsApp to your phone, because that's how they communicate over there. They don't really talk on the phone. They actually WhatsApp each other a lot. I hate WhatsApp because of the security vulnerabilities that has been exploited by the Israeli government, Mossad, and how they're able to tap into, hack into people's WhatsApp. So that's why I don't really support it. But that's the extent of what they use to communicate. If anybody come up with an alternative solution, then you're going to be golden. You'll be a very valuable person. How many blockchain startups did you run into at the summit? Oh man, there was probably a dozen, and these are African women, African men partnering up and creating their own blockchain consultancy firms and things like that. There's a lot of blockchain discussion going on over there. Heavy. You know, they're not reading articles and then, you know, doing a live stream. They're actually writing code and stuff like that. They're really into it. So Anthony Liu said most Black in the States have to start aligning themselves back to the continent. They've scared off. They've scared off from the propaganda machine. Yeah, we talked about that. We talked about that. There's a lot of people who push this idea that Africans are living in mud huts and stuff like that, and Ebola virus and stuff like that. Not saying that you don't have the Ebola virus over there, but you do have a lot of propaganda being pushed about people living in massive levels of poverty, and you know they're walking around barefoot and flies running around and you know floating around their face and their bellies are poked out. That's not really 100% the narrative, the actual perspective of Africa. Jibba Jabba asked, Mike V, your advice is have credentials and a long-term plan for your business venture. Respect the culture and go for it. So yeah, credentials. Being certified is one thing, but being able to execute your skill set is gonna be another, right? Yeah, if you can write code, a lot of the guys I ran into, a lot of the black men I ran into, they write Python. They write in Python as their language. That's their language of choice. It's Python. And have a long-term plan for your business venture. Yeah, if you're going in for business, they have special, what they call special economic zones for that very thing. So you can actually benefit from all of that. You can actually benefit from all that. Respect the culture, man. You're gonna get absorbed into the culture. There is no other way around that. I mean, I'm not saying you're gonna be walking around in dashikis or anything like that, but you will get absorbed into the culture. Just the way it's in your face. There's no way to get around it. It's in your face. Can't get around that. I think this is just my perspective. I think that smart TVs are going to be huge on the continent, man. It's going to be huge because most people can't afford or don't necessarily need a full computer anymore. You don't need to go have a desktop computer. 1/3 of what you need to do on the internet can actually be done from your phone. But a lot of people over there don't have smartphones. They actually have dumb phones. I think the majority of them have dumb phones. So they just have these Nokia, Motorola, Razor sort of phones. That's how they kind of communicate with each other. But the ones who have smartphones have them because they, you know, they have a need for it because of the apps and stuff like that. But I think that smart TVs are going to take off over there because if I have a TV that has apps loaded in on it, and I have a keyboard where I can actually interact and do all of the necessary functions of a desktop computer, and I can watch TV on it, and I can stream YouTube on it, that's huge. That is huge. And I could do WhatsApp or Viber or something like that on the same TV. That's huge. That's a huge transformation from the regular analog TV that so many people have. And 4G LTE is coming on board. It's kind of sparse in the city, but it's still available. And so what we were talking about was TV white spaces, the ability to deliver internet bandwidth over TV analog white spaces. I think you can deliver up to something like 80 megabits, which is actually fairly sufficient for watching content and things like that. 3G, I think, is something like 20 megabits, maybe 18 megabits at best, 18 to 20 megabits. So you factor in TV white space as a medium for communications, internet communications, then you're already ahead of the curve, because now it's just about implementing the technology stack that's going to drive that initiative. Roscoe asks, what kind of things do you think Africa will need in order to develop into a more stable country? So Africa is not a country, it's a continent, but I understand your point. Each country, what would they need to do to develop? That's already happening. So it's about structure, right? Business structure. Businesses thrive in stability, political stability, and economic stability. Whenever you have volatility in currencies, which is what was talked about, you tend to have worse outcomes because no one really wants to invest into areas that's unstable, whether it's politically or economically. And so Bitcoin, if you look at Bitcoin from a volatility standpoint, it's actually way more stable than any African currency. So that's why cryptocurrencies became a focus of discussion, because if your nation state currency, the traditional legacy currency, is not stable, where it has this massive volatility, up high highs and low lows, that's not good for business. And so cryptocurrencies can actually be stabilized through, just by lines of code if you tie it in with natural resources. You see, Bitcoin is actually more stable than 20 sub-Saharan African legacy currencies, classic currencies. So that's to answer your question, that's what they're talking about, Roscoe. Do you foresee Africa created a government similar to the US or China or something unique? No. I think that Pan-Africanism is very unique in this perspective. So they're looking at this from a very very unique perspective on how you tie in frameworks, regulatory frameworks, compliance and security and things of that nature. It's going to be very different because there's a shared history of colonialism that is driving them to actually lean on a different perspective. Whereas in America, colonialism was really just driven by Europeans, more importantly the British and the French, and how they handled non-Caucasoid people, non-Anglo-Saxon people. It's a very different experience. And so I don't think that they will adopt some of those ideas. At least Robert Mugabe was talking about that in 1979 or 1978. He said himself, you can find a video on YouTube of him talking about, they see how the West works. They talk about the United States, and they do not want anything to do with how they run their countries. They don't want that. But that was back in the 1970s, so things could actually change now. Mega Montana says, I was thinking about recycling Ashford sheets in Ghana. Did you see or hear anyone doing it already at the summit? No, I haven't heard anything about that. That's something new to me. Faber asked, how do we get into the smart display market, but from Southeast Asia and ship them? I think there's different ways of how this can go about. Africa actually has the capacity to produce displays, but it depends on how you go about doing it. So there's enough space to create manufacturing facilities, but how do you, what's going to be the difference, right? It could be tariffs, right? Anything you import from China could have a 5% tariff on it, or whatever it is. Any sort of tariff that you're going to put on the import good is actually going to affect the cost of it. So so to your point, can Africans actually manufacture their own display panels? I think they can, because the resources are actually there on the ground. So it wouldn't be much. And that's why logistics, supply chain logistics and trucking is actually important. It's actually very important, because if you're talking about moving 100 miles, 150 miles from a mining facility, moving those goods, the material from the mining facility itself, and then put it into a research laboratory, and then developing the screen there, and then putting it into production, into a production laboratory, down the road or something like that. The time, the mean time between travel of from the ground to the R&D to the production is actually fairly short. So you're not waiting 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks for a Chinese merchant ship or a Southeast Asian merchant ship to come. You're actually waiting hours before the materials move from the ground to the R&D facility to the production facility. But I'm not the manufacturing engineer or anything like that, materials engineer. So I wouldn't be able to just, I wouldn't be able to discuss that, at least at length. Maddox asks, how many people that you ran into over there run Red Hat Linux? They don't actually run Red Hat, but they do run things like SUSE or Ubuntu. Ubuntu's really popular over there for obvious reasons. Is C++ viable for programming a blockchain? Yeah and no. I think older legacy blockchain, and we shouldn't use the term blockchain. What we should use is distributed ledger technology. You do see C++ being used, but Python, Go, and what's the other language? C# is starting to become C# is actually starting to become very popular because it's interoperable in how efficient it is at managing memory. Memory management is actually pretty good. Memory resource management is actually pretty good with C# than it is with C++. C++ is a lot more strenuous to actually develop on in terms of blockchain. And so blockchain requires a lot of efficiency. If you don't have efficiency, it's not going to be very viable. And so the reason why blockchain is so important of a discussion over there is because regulatory frameworks and compliance checks, actually blockchain solves all of that because it's a distributed ledger technology. And when you have something like blockchain in place, that actually adds to the checks and balances of doing business abroad and continentally, right? Whether it's buying oil, buying gas, and things like that from a nation state perspective, they can't cook the books, so to speak, as they used to do back in the day, because blockchain distributed ledger technology is immutable. That means once that's been added to the ledger, you're not going to be able to change it. Once it's in, it's in. And so cooking the books would be a thing of a past, unless they, finagle some other things on their own. I don't foresee that happen being a deal. So. Yep, engineering cannabis says it in the chat. It says the immutability of blockchain is crucial. It is, but from a governmental standpoint, from a economic standpoint, it's very crucial. So yeah, you can live pretty comfortably over there, man. If you're coming from the West, if you take your 401k, your IRA account and transfer a lot of those funds, and you cash out and you transfer a lot of those funds over there, you can actually live pretty decent. You can live pretty decent as long as you are pushing your own agenda from a skill set standpoint, from a job standpoint. That actually should not be an issue. I see too many Black Americans over there who are really just tearing up the continent, man, from a software developer standpoint. They're just writing code, man, and cashing checks, man. They're just doing their thing. Roscoe asks, what areas in Africa do you see becoming the financial and technology centers? That's interesting because South Africa, because of its political maturity, and is actually going to be a very stable part of the region. But Nigeria is going to be a powerhouse because its population is going to explode over the next 20 years, 20 to 25 years. By 2025, you're talking about Nigeria having anywhere between 275 million to 300 million people. They're going to rival the United States in population. And so the question for Nigeria is, how do you take all of those 200 to 300 million people and get them and have 90% efficiency and identification so that they can be banked? Because a lot of Nigerians are underbanked. Only 34 million Nigerians actually have a bank account out of the 200 plus million that you see right now. So only 1/4 of their of their country is actually legally banked. But with cryptocurrencies, that's going to change, because now what cryptocurrency is going to do is it's going to allow people who did not have a bank account before, who did not have any sort of spendable spendability from a consumer standpoint, will now have some form of spendability. And so Nigeria is going to be the financial and technological powerhouse of the continent. They have a lot of human capital. They have a lot of maturity in terms of finance. Although the currency is topsy-turvy, it's one of those things where you tie in that human capital with fourth industrial emerging tech like Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and blockchain, and AI, and things like that. And they have a very mature tech incubator space over in Nigeria. In fact, I think Nigeria has the most tech incubators on the whole continent. So they're cultivating along now. I think Nigeria is going to be a breakout country in the continent between now and 2025. They're going to be a breakout country because they're scaling and they're getting better at what they're trying to do.
Hey, what's going on, Mike?
Yo, what's up, man?
Chilling, man. Just on the way home.
All right. What's Saudi Garvey? Haiti here. Roscoe, to answer your question, that's the deal, man. Get your passport. Get your passport game up, man. It takes like 3 to 5 days to get your passport. Go take the picture and then fill out the application and then go down to your local place in your local passport facility and go fill it out. I got that and the passport card within 3 days.
Matter of fact, as soon as I get back, 'cause I'm still in Colombia right now, in Medellin. Peace to all the original men and women on the panel.
Mhm.
And as soon as I get back, I'll probably get back this weekend to the States. And as soon as I get home, I'll probably fill out the application to Ghana like Friday, Saturday,
Mhm.
and like Monday. I mean, I'll probably send it out with my passport as soon as I get home because I had to reschedule my flight to the 26th to Ghana.
Mhm.
So I'll be there on the 27th.
Dope. Yeah, so get the passport, dude. It only costs you $250. You get it within 3 days, should be no problem. As long as you don't have any child support issues, anything like that, I don't think you should have any issues. Also, look up the events that are happening on the continent. Download Eventbrite to your phone. That's going to be critical because most of these events are actually posted on Eventbrite. So you can see a lot of these events happening ahead of time. You can kind of either pay ahead or save it, put it in your favorites because there's a little heart button. You can click on it and it will kind of give you a reminder just before the event is taking place. And then you can start determining whether or not it's going to be viable for you to book a trip or not. So that's how I found out about African Tech Summit a couple of years ago. We were having some discussions at I think it was like Nisby or something like that, and that happened to come across my feed. And I said, "What is this? African Tech Summit thing?" And I said, "Let me look into this." And I was supposed to go last year, and I didn't go. And I promised that 2020 will be the year that I return, man, and do my thing over there.
Sister Lucy, she told me was that when it comes to Eventbrite, just don't don't buy the ticket on Eventbrite because a lot of time, at least in Ghana,
His mic is breaking up. Yeah, Learning Every Day asks the question. He says, "Who do you think is next in line after Nigeria?" That's hard to say. South Africa is very mature in terms of the tech sector. And so I would say that South Africa is a very close second behind Nigeria. And then I would probably say somebody like Algeria will probably be close third or fourth. I wouldn't say that Rwanda is 100% there yet because they're still having infrastructure issues in terms of how they deliver fast communications, right? They need LTE. They have 4G, but you have to pay more for it. And so capitalization, technological capitalization is still a burden on a lot of the development, because if everybody had fast internet service, if everybody had access to fast communications, then you would have a different perspective. But if you keep holding people back, through these sort of not so much as colonial, but sort of hostile markets that create these sort of burdens where people can't actually adopt the technologies, that becomes a problem. And so that's why I say after Nigeria, you'll see South Africa really, really close behind Nigeria, only because they don't have the human capital in the same way that Nigeria does. Nigeria is a powerhouse in terms of what we're talking about here. I say Algeria because Algeria has a lot of political stability and a lot of civil engineering stability over there, right? So you're we talked about earlier about them having natural gas and things like that that they capitalize off of. Very good universities, so they have good academics, academic achievement over there. So their literacy rates are pretty high over there, and so their tech sector is going to be very stable as well. At least from what we've read on here, Algeria does have a developing tech sector. Tunisia as well. Tunisia is starting to grow in that area as well. Egypt, from what I saw at the event, Egypt is starting to respond. So Egypt will probably be in the top 10, but nowhere near Nigeria, because they don't have the human capital like that. And from the Eastern standpoint, Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, those three are going to be like no different than each other. And so they'll be in that bottom top 10, right? They'll take that 8, 9, and 10 slot from a position standpoint, from a hierarchy standpoint. You know, Nigeria will be that dominant player, but everybody else will be behind them, but not that far behind them. You know, I would say that Rwanda still has about maybe 5 years to go before they can really catch up like that. I would say that Kenya is in the same boat. You know, 3 to 4 years, they'll be able to really speed up development in that area that we're talking about, right? Uganda will probably be the last one behind all of them because of you know, the human capital factor that they have. I actually met a brother on the plane when I was coming back here when we were in Qatar, in Doha. He was on his way to Poland to look at some to do some business on manufacturing and bringing it back to Uganda. And so Uganda is moving, but they're not moving at the same pace as Nigeria is. So that's what I'm saying is that Uganda will probably be in that, out of that top 10, they'll be number 10 until they can actually demonstrate that they have the ability to compete in that area. And then you have Cameroon and DRC and those areas, man. I think that, you know, they'll be all fractionalized in terms of where their space in that top 10. We did have one person from Zimbabwe there, but not really. I didn't really get in too deep into the discussions with them. So. But yeah, we talked about before that about transportation, right? You know, Africa really should be looking at maglev trains if they're going to go that route. You know, you can't, to me, going back to a traditional train system, a basic locomotive, that's not good enough, right? You gotta think, how is this going to work out for the next 80 to 100 years or 50 to 100 years? That train has to be maglev. It just can't be anything less than that. That's a very good investment. If you're looking at, let's say, moving from South Africa to Botswana or to Zimbabwe, you know, those sort of landlocked countries, a bullet train going to Zimbabwe at 300, 400 miles an hour, actually, you know, that rivals a plane. A plane is fairly, although a plane moves at 500, 600 miles an hour, it's also very expensive and very risky too. it goes up, but you know, how does it come back down, right? On a maglev, man, that thing's gonna move because it's built just for that purpose. And so the ability to move people back and forth between borders at a high rate of speed nullifies the necessity of building these massive airports. But you can add the maglevs to your aerospace transportation, but it has to make sense to build a rail system going forward. From this time going forward, it has to make sense. You can't just throw up a basic locomotive and a couple of cars and sit and think you're doing something. Not that I'm knocking Kenya or Standard Gauge Railway (SGR). I'm saying putting money into something, into making an investment into railway transportation has to make a lot more sense than just legacy stuff. Bullet trains and stuff like that is going to be the game changer. It's going to be a game changer. Micro transportation and stuff like that added to it is going to be a game changer because I mean, we think about EVs, electric scooters. When people just think about a cheap Razor scooter and stuff like that, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about advanced scooters with dashboards on them and 4G connectivity, IoT based scooters that can actually travel 23, 25 miles a day and on one single charge. That's different type of stuff. So
Hey, Mike.
hey, Rain One.
Hey, peace to everyone, by the way, on the panel and to the chat. Mike,
Hello.
I just wanted to say really quickly that I really and truly appreciate your commitment and just everything that you're doing, bringing back the information, being so boots on the ground, just everything. I just really wanted to come on and just tell you how much I appreciate you and your commitment and your excellence. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Definitely. But yeah, micro transportation connected to larger transportation, medium transportation, such as I don't see them having autonomous vehicles, but like the brother said at the summit, it's not an autonomous vehicle that you should be trying to develop. It's you're trying to develop uh, the roadway that's going to be intelligent enough to carry that sort of autonomous vehicle. That's more important than the autonomous vehicle itself. So that's actually pretty dope. That's actually a pretty dope perspective that the brother took on that.
Well, Mike, it makes sense. There's a lot of places where electric vehicles can be had. I mean, they have them in abundance and surplus in China, right? So unless you're doing something that's specifically engineered and designed in Africa, like more of like a high end or a production class vehicle, I wouldn't say that electric cars and stuff like that would really be the focus for Africa. I really do think it is in the infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's going to be in the roadways and intelligent roadways, smart smart traffic management systems.
Yep.
That is where it's going to be. The cars you can get those anytime, dude. They're in abundance already. You need the smart infrastructure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where a lot of the development needs to go into. How do I make sure that the roadway that I'm putting down is actually going to be environmentally friendly, right? You don't want to just lay down asphalt and not realize that, oh, well, this has to be replaced in a couple of years. And I really don't, I've already spent my budget if I'm an economic minister, right? If I'm looking at how do I manage, how do I get the best bang for my buck from an investment standpoint, from an infrastructure standpoint? How do I do that? Same thing with like you say, complex about traffic management systems and stuff like that. We talked about gondolas before. Gondolas, I think, are going to be very instrumental in moving people around without actually laying down legacy train systems. In the United States, we have, New York City Transit, MTA, and, MBTA here in Massachusetts, and um, uh, I forget the one out there in California, the BART.
Metro.
BART.
You got the BART. You got the BART up in the Bay Area, and then in LA, you got the Metro.
Yep. Let me share my screen real quick. And so we talked about this the other day, but I just want to put more emphasis behind it in that this should be the perspective of how you run your transit system. Your next transit system should look like this. If I'm advising the African government, like the brother said in the chat, what would I be advising them on and things like that? I'll be advising them on things like this. This is a major, although this seems like a major infrastructure development, it's actually makes more sense than to be trying to lay down traditional railway, because this is something that's going to last for a long, long time, and the only thing you got to do is swap out the cars. Whereas with the railway system, you've really got to go through a lot of engineering, civil engineering behind that, because you can only lay down the railway at certain places, right? You can't just cut through a jungle and then think that that's not going to disrupt the ecosystem.
Right.
So that can actually have more negative effects if you try to lay down a basic system like that, and then not take into consideration that the environment that you actually benefit from is actually going to be disrupted by it. So it's a negative disruptor is my point. I say that gondolas are a positive disruptor because of the way they're structured, like this one right here, how advanced it is, and how ingenious it is. Because when I was out there, I probably should have took a picture of it. The amount of people waiting for one bus, it was crazy.
I mean,
like
that's why this thing makes sense, man. When you were first telling me about it, I was trying to picture it, and then you showed me, and I was like, oh, like a ski lift. You were like, yeah, a gondola. And I was like, oh, well, yeah, man. That just makes sense, because it's kind of like how in LA we have like a monorail that's elevated, right? See, so it's kind of like you're utilizing you're utilizing elevated space for travel, not like a helicopter or a plane, but literally just maybe like 30 feet up.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And that's free and clear of traffic. That's a traffic free path. Do you realize how fast people can get from point A to point B just by utilizing something like that?
Yeah. That's like somebody said in the chat. If you were advising the African government, what would you be advising on? This is exactly what I'd be advising on. They're pretty autonomous too. It's not like, oh, well, then you have to wait for you have to train them to do this. No, you get in that sucker on the right time, it's going to move. It doesn't require a whole lot. And plus, now you're talking about automated systems that work in the background to actually move these things around. And very rarely do these things break down. It's very rare. You don't hear about cable snapping and stuff like that, because they're kind of built and engineered for the long haul, right? They're built to be in cold climates and stuff like that. If you're in a warm climate like on the continent, you really don't have a whole lot of environmental challenges.
I think you just have basic maintenance. I mean, what is it? It's a pole and some power lines.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other thing that's brilliant about it too. It's just stick a pole in the ground. You don't have to lay down like roads and all that, or you take advantage of pre-existing roadways and you just put like the gondola structures like in the median of the roadways, right? So in between the traffic as they go in two different directions, in the middle, there's the gondola system that rides right above, that just rides right above.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. So that, that's my perspective. I think that's the best way for them to go about it. I mean, looking at this one right here, this looks pretty fairly recent. It says that it has a open air. So this is kind of like a convertible, or not a convertible, but a two-tier one, similar to like when you see the buses in London. The buses in London that have the double deckers. This would be the equivalent on a ski.
They call those a lorry or something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that would be dope, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Mark C in the chat says, so autonomous bullet trains. That sounds like a beautiful idea. Yeah, China actually has an autonomous bullet train, or at least it has some form of.
It has a level of autonomy to it.
Yeah, and I don't think it's level 5, but I do think it's up there where a conductor doesn't have to necessarily be there.
Yeah, no, it's like a level 3. Basically, the conductor just has to sit there.
Yeah.
And under certain conditions, the conductor does have to actually maintain control. And then what they use is driver aid or conductor aid controls. But I think there's only kind of like under like certain stretches, they can go full autonomous. Mm-hmm. Like, conductors can take a nap or something.
Ejitsa says that gondolas aren't practical. You need something that can transport a large number of people on a single fare. Have you ever seen Legos during peak rush hours? So I think you might be missing the point. Even now, because a lot of a train car, right? A typical train car will hold probably about 1,000 people, but the infrastructure investment into something like that is so massive. It's out of reach for most African governments, and that's why you see so many cars and motorcycles on the road, because they don't have a mass transit system, because it's just not feasible. At least not right now. The return on investment is not there. And so that's why we were talking about gondolas, because a gondola can hold up to 30 to 40 people per car. And so the cost of it, from an investment standpoint, makes a lot more sense, because it does more than one thing. Whereas that mass transit railway system that you see in the United States is not applicable to the continent in that capacity, unless they use something like an autonomous tram, right? Russia has trams that just don't even have any. It's not connected to a railway. It actually has wheels on the bottom of it, streetcar wheels. So let me see if I can pull up a picture of that.
Kind of like a trolley.
Yeah, let me see. Here it is right here. This is the Russian tram that I was talking about. So I forget, here it is right here. It's a futuristic tram, but it basically is not tied into railway structure. It's basically tied into the basic roadway that you have set up. But that's not something that Africans are going to adopt right away, because it's so expensive.
We have something similar to that in LA. It's basically like two buses in one. It's a articulating bus, right? So in the middle it hinges and moves.
Oh,
right.
It's called a bender.
Bender, yeah. We got something like those, but these are way more sophisticated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, called them bender buses. Yeah, most places do have them. In the city, that makes sense. But what happens when you need to move from the city to the countryside or the rural side? That's where a gondola comes in. That's all I'm saying. Ijisa. Yeah, so royalty brings up actually a very good point. He says that meanwhile in NYC, the MTA is near bankruptcy and the infrastructure is falling apart daily. Yeah, that's a part of what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about. That stuff is expensive to maintain. It's a disaster if you don't do it right from the jump street. The return on investment is there. It's just too many bureaucrats embezzling the funds. They can easily implement the infrastructure and get a return on investment immediately simply because of the share of people that need to move around. Yeah, but like Zoe Rossi just said, a place like NYC, who is a powerhouse from a cultural and economic standpoint, can't even maintain their own trains.
You ever catch the trains in Chicago?
Oh man, those things are rickety. I mean, in Massachusetts, we just had a couple of trains actually derail not too long ago, about a few months ago, because they were so poorly maintained. Not because
like when I was in Chicago, they had actually shut down the L train that runs along the Dan Ryan, and they had shut it down to basically lay down new tracks because those tracks had basically been there since they built that L train route.
Yeah,
they had never been updated, maintenance, or anything really. So they literally laid down new set of tracks since that thing was built.
Yeah, you never hear about a gondola route needs to be shut down because it stopped functioning. You don't really hear about that. Those things are built to work nonstop because they're magnetic cables, right? Magnetic pulleys on cables. So they basically just move around. As long as there's electricity to move it, it's going to keep moving. Not knocking Ijisa's point. I'm just saying that if NYC can really maintain their trains, I don't see how African government is going to be able to maintain theirs.
I mean, you got to look at it. You have to kind of look at where you're starting, and you have to look at what makes sense to start with. Right? We would ideally or traditionally, we're going to think, yeah, you got to start with, buses and taxis and, but we grew to that. We grew to that. And the fact of the matter is that there's so many other options. There's so many other things that you can take in lieu of a bus or a taxi, because you have micro transport, you have your own electrified vehicles, your mid-drive electric bikes, you got your electric scooter, micro transport. I mean, goddamn, you name it. In addition to the traditional stuff. So what do you do? Like, what is the angle that you take on developing your infrastructure? And what you do is you go with the stuff that's future forward. You don't do it the stuff that saddles you down with the very issues that developed countries are going broke dealing with.
Yeah,
you might as well just start with the future.
Yeah, you gotta get out of that. Going back to the legacy infrastructure thing, that's not going to work. For the long haul, it's not going to work because it's not adaptable to next generation technology, right?
You're going to implement it just to scrap it, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why America can't keep up with China and Japan and these other ones, because America developed their rail systems 100 plus years ago, whereas China 30 years ago didn't have a rail system. Now they have a rail system. They have the fastest rail system because it's on maglev. Well, what is the Chinese? 600 kilometers per hour, 327 miles per hour. That's why you need to implement maglev. You don't go back to the old traditional way of things. 600 kilometers an hour maglev train prototype. This is what they're working on. In the United States, you don't have that.
Dude, in California, they've been fighting and bitching and moaning over the high speed rail line. So what happened was is that in certain
Hmm. What happened to complex? Okay.
Wait, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, yeah, I just got home, man. I'm on Wi-Fi now. No, I was saying in California, dude, certain stretches of the high-speed rail that they were trying to implement here got funded, and then other places rejected it. So that means that certain places they started working on the shit, and in other places they were like, "Well, we don't know where you're going to run that part of the train line through because we ain't paying for that shit." So it's just all ass backwards, man.
Yeah,
It is America's ass backwards to a large degree, dude.
yeah. I mean, we can't take the Western perspective of infrastructure development and apply it to the continent. It's not the same. It's not the same, man. Different people, different ball game, different environment. You can't apply that same level of integration. It's just not the same.
Yeah, and all the bureaucratic red tape works a little different too.
Right, right.
You know, you don't grease palms over there the way you grease them here.
Mm-hmm. So being a part of that infrastructure development is important, man, because they want to hear all perspectives. If there's a more cost-effective way of implementing transit, not transit, transportation infrastructure, then yeah, that has to be heard. Let me see what else. What else? We'll close out in 5 minutes. Jesus says modular engineering can easily solve the cost of maintenance and upgrading issues. Hey, you can always go apply and work for the MTA and let them know that. Yeah, Anthony Liu says the gondola makes the most sense, especially because of property, domain right, and cost of build. That's been my point from the beginning. You can't just cut through a jungle or some protected wildlife environment and then think that that's not going to have a disruption to the ecosystem. Yeah, Zoe Royalty says the MTA is $42 billion in debt. It doesn't have the money to update the infrastructure. The state nor federal government won't bail out the MTA. And there you have cost overrun. Jay Green says they tried the high-speed rail from Dallas to Houston and they had to go to court, and I haven't heard anything since. Yeah, and there you go.
There you go. That's that red tape we're talking about. Same thing going on in Cali.
Yeah, I think there was supposed to be a bullet train from Las Vegas to
Yeah.
Cali. I haven't heard anything since.
No, that's what we do. Certain parts of the corridor, some certain counties, certain municipalities, they granted the money for it. Others decided not to. So what you have is you have like, okay, construction here, no construction there. Construction over there, no construction over there. So you have like gaps, basically.
Yep.
You don't have a line that connects.
Because it's not well thought out.
That and well, yeah, because if you're gonna leave it up to individual municipalities to okay the funding for it, well, then that's going to require everybody to get on board.
Mhm. Mhm. We got a G's on the panel. What's going on, man?
Yo,
Hey,
yo.
what's up? I just wanted to say that the thing about the gondolas, I just don't think it's feasible, especially in these mega cities where you're just trying to transport so many people moving, especially in the mornings and usually around 5 o'clock when all these things are closing. I mean, it would just clog up the skyline. They're not meant Gondolas aren't meant for like mass transit. They're not meant for moving. Um, it's not meant for high capacity. That's all I'm saying. It's I just imagine what the skyline would look like. And I think they have to work on an incline. So you would need it to go from either you know uh, uh, I guess a high elevation to a lower elevation or something like that. Something like
You
that.
never
I
been
know.
on like an above ground tramway?
Yeah, I have, but they're always going on. They always they. I mean, and that's a moot point right there. But I'm just saying that
It's
it's
the same thing though.
to move a lot of people.
Yeah.
Are we talking about above ground trail? Are you talking about like a light rail?
No. It like an above ground tramway. You never been on an above ground tramway? It's not exactly the same thing as a gondola. Well, it is conceptually is that people are traveling above ground. And what you're talking about is space utilization. So we're not talking about putting a gondola like a bus-sized gondola above people's heads and saying, "Hey, well, look, we'll just take the equivalent of people that would ride in one bus, and then we'll just put that in this bus-sized structure up above people's heads." Gondolas, they're smaller, and what you do is you have more of them going, and they only go maybe like 20 miles an hour, 25 miles an hour. The only
I
difference
mean,
is that they don't encounter traffic, so they move people faster.
Yeah.
they have one on to get from Manhattan to Roosevelt Island. There's a tram you take, but I think it's only like one or two cars. They even have it in I believe state
Wait,
Nigeria, but
wait, you
it
borked.
was.
Can you repeat that? You borked out a little bit.
I said they have it in to get from Manhattan to Roosevelt Island in New York. There's a tramway, but it's only two cars. And I think Donald Duke, the former governor of Cross Rivers, had actually built one in Cross River State, Nigeria. But it was actually meant for just like a one of those what do you call those national parks.
Okay.
So they have it. Unless I'm misunderstanding you, if you're meaning it for like mass transit, because my those kind of one of things I've always been interested in like maybe putting a light rail or subway system in Africa, but it's just so many people. It just wouldn't be. It would. They tried a monorail. In Pahaka, Nigeria. There's a monorail that I don't even know what the progress on the monorail is. But even looking at that, it's pretty much it would be useless because just the sheer amount of people that need to move around. That monorail just it's like one line and stuff.
Well,
And
we got one of those in LA, and I mean, I think LA probably has more people. And
mm,
what city in Africa are you talking about? That
Legos.
well,
Lagos?
no. The monorail is in Pahaka. It's in the east. Let me see. Let me look up what the monorail.
How many
It's not
people are there?
in Pahaka. Pahaka is like has to be, and it's not necessarily just the density. It's a large number of people in a small. So very like some of these places, it's over 1 million people.
Mhm.
Almost 2 million. Almost 2 million in Pahaka.
I think LA's got about. I think we're at three, maybe
How
three or
many
four.
how many lines do they have on the monorail?
No, they just have the one that runs clear from Santa Monica
Hmm.
to downtown, but it runs basically from the west side of LA on into the east into downtown LA. So it
Mhm.
goes across the city.
Mhm.
So
It just
you would go from north and south, and you would converge to the midpoint, and then take the rail, and then you could traverse from east to west. So it's really a matter, again, it's how you're moving people.
Mhm.
It's all a matter of how you're moving people. Like I also pointed, you were saying traffic. I said, well, look, if a gondola does 20 miles an hour but doesn't encounter any traffic, it's gonna get from point A to point B quicker than a car doing 40 miles an hour in stop and go traffic.
And it's actually energy efficient and actually clean energy because it's not polluting the environment at all. And
Right.
that's one of the main objectives, right? Is to how do you get something from a clean energy standpoint. This is actually the most clean energy you can actually get, and at the cost as well. This is
well, you got to ask yourself why have it. I mean, who has implemented it? And who has what place has implemented it as a form of mass transit? Nowhere.
Well,
that's
go ahead,
different.
Mike.
Well, yeah, that's a different question, right? When I was in Rwanda, there were thousands of people waiting on these small buses that were no
Buses.
that were
And trust me, Kigali is gonna grow. And you put a gondola there, within 5 years they'll outgrow it.
let me finish my statement.
All right, go ahead.
The buses that they were using were no bigger than the gondolas that they had, that we're seeing in the picture right here. Even the most advanced gondola is actually going to be a lot more efficient than the bus system that they currently have. And so when you start talking about laying down rail systems and stuff like that, that's expensive. That's why the Chinese had to come in and do it for the Africans in the first place. There was no way they were going to be able to fund it for themselves. It's just not feasible for them at the moment. And so you lay down a system like that and you get stuck with it, for the long term. And so what I'm saying here is that if you're taking people from the urban city to the rural parts of the outside the city, you don't want to invest a whole lot of money into a simple railway system like SGR in Kenya. You don't want to do that. That's too expensive. Because the return on investment is never going to be there because the people are not going to be able to afford it. And every time you go up on fares, the people are going to freak out about it. That's why NYC has its problems that it does now. They can't afford it. Like Zoe Royalty said in the chat, they're $42 billion in debt. There's no return on investment for them on that.
And all they're going to have to do is more maintenance.
And so, yeah, it's
more shit is going to have to get replaced, rebuilt, more costs. You're already in debt. Do you see,
I think NYC is a particular case, but like he said, a big part of that is the unions and the labor costs. I mean, if you ever go there now, you just see guys walking around. I mean, they've done stories about the workers and stuff like that. They're not really doing anything. But overhead is killing them. Now, with what I will say about with Kigali, Kigali is a small city right now, but in 5 years they will outgrow that gondola. Why can't they get a loan? Why can't the country borrow I mean, they can get the investment. Look at what it says about this monorail. It says the project was announced in 2011 and construction commenced in 2012. As of September 2017, construction has only been partially completed, despite $400 million having been spent, and the project is at a standstill. See, that just tells you that someone was they're stealing that money. So it's not that they don't have the money. It's like it's the discipline.
You're conflating bureaucratic red tape with the feasibility of the technology, right? Like okay, so it's not feasible because people mishandle money. No, that it's not feasible because it's feasible. It's not doable because people mishandle money. You need the money to execute the project, right? See, so let's put bureaucratic red tape in one place, and then we'll put the technology over here, right? It's the responsibility to implement the technology, not get rich fat at the trough, and then basically leave the project belly up.
I mean, I think of
That's what you're
feasibility.
talking about.
Well, here's
It's
the
not
thing. I
really
think
the
of
technology that's
uh,
feasible. It's the people behind
well,
the rollout of the project.
Mhm.
I think the feasibility studies easily show that because countries can get can get the money. They can be it through some type of a foreign
There's a million
investment.
ways to skin a cat. They can get it.
They can get it. You're right. You're right. They
Yeah,
can get
there's a
it.
million ways they can get
And
it.
and feasibility studies do show that with the sheer number of ridership and fares, as long as they're able to be able to collect fares, I mean, the thing will pay for itself in 20 years. So it's not, to say that it's expensive. No, that's not. I mean, I don't think countries, transportation system it's not like stadiums. It's not going to be a white elephant. Transfer if you invest in the right thing and it's done with due diligence, it will pay for itself. So that trans.
That's not okay. Not really. Not if you not if you're using technology that costs you what you're making. You'll never get above.
What do you mean?
So what I'm saying is this: I deploy a bunch of buses, and were they diesel? What kind of fuel are we running? Diesel? We'll go diesel buses, right?
Hmm.
You know what the maintenance costs on diesel buses are? Ty City's he's a diesel mechanic. He could tell you. Okay, you know what the maintenance cost on a gondola is? One that's
But
electromagnetic.
what's the maintenance cost on a light rail? Building a light rail. What's the maintenance cost of buying a TBM? And I mean, it costs a lot more money to put it underground, but it can be done. I mean, you know, but see, the reason why they can't do it is because they don't have an electrical infrastructure.
No,
But
that's not it. That has nothing to do with it.
Isn't it?
That has nothing to do with it.
well, I'm not because no, because I'm not talking about diesel buses. I mean,
No,
those are
it's
those are
about.
relics of the past. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying it's about cost. It costs a lot of money. Just to put down that SGR was like $2 to $3 billion or $5 billion, something like that. Ridiculous amount of money that it costs to run something like that. And that's old technology. That's not new technology. That's old. So you
I don't think.
imagine, so you're imagining that you can just roll something like that out, and the only reason it's not being rolled out is because of lack of
You know, you know,
electrification.
it's funny. I think they have gondolas in. Is it Colombia or Brazil? They actually there's one place.
That this one shows Colombia, Medellin, in Colombia.
Medellin. Okay, yeah, they have it in Medellin, and where people take it, and I mean, it still doesn't do anything to. I mean, that's just a small. I mean, if you're talking about it to be a complement to a larger mass transit system, then cool. But for that to be the only thing,
It's
no.
about the
Well,
last.
a mass transit system is comprised of a multitude of
Okay.
transportation
If
mechanisms.
that's
So,
okay,
so, so, for example, in LA, well, you're talking to a micro transport guy here, right? So I've done my own feasibility studies on this shit, right? I could tell you a little something about how LA is kind of the tapestry of LA and what they've done over the last 15 years to actually redevelop the infrastructure to incorporate other modes of transportation. Because see, they were betting on things like micro transport here in the future. Next thing you know, you got the bird scooter phenomenon, born and raised out here in California. Okay, so your transportation infrastructure has to accommodate a multitude of transportation mechanisms. We're not saying go with gondolas and then get rid of buses, right? Because you're saying, oh, well, you're not going to be able to move everybody on gondolas. No one said anything about moving everybody on a gondola. You
Yeah,
may have a different pricing tier for gondolas. That might be something that a certain class of people may be using. And what that does is it starts to then alleviate some of the ridership on the buses. It lessens the traffic on the roads a little bit more, makes things move a little bit freer on the ground because you got people traveling above ground.
yeah,
There's layers of transportation. We're not talking about merely removing one thing and replacing it with something that just goes on a rail above the ground. That's not what we're talking about.
Here's the caption right here. It says city planners only need to find locations to build the cable car towers and the requisite airspace. Gondolas don't move as many people as other types of mass transit, but as a supplement to existing systems, they can be quite effective. This is in the article right here we were looking at. And it's specifically talking about New York City. So you see multiple countries actually use it. Bolivia, um,
Yeah, it's called Metro Cable in
right?
Colombia and
Yeah.
in Venezuela. That Mexicable in in Mexico. It
It
says
says
aerial lifts are not often used as a mass transit system, although they can be as such. They're becoming more popular. Yeah, so
yeah. It says the gondola project reports that um, the gondola has transported 50 million passengers in 2 years of operation and saved commuters 652 million minutes. The project was so successful that the city is now planning to build 7 more lines that will extend the system by 20 kilometers. According to the New York Times, La Paz is the first city to use cable cars as the backbone of a mass transit system. So that's all I was referring to. So I'm not, pulling this out of thin air. I'm saying that this is a viable system for African governments.
okay, I get what you mean now. I mean, yeah, not being like you said, not being the as long as it's a part of a bigger network.
Well,
Mhm.
it would have
Yeah.
to be, because the thing is this: if you were going to incorporate this into a pre-existing transportation infrastructure, I mentioned this a little bit earlier. So you would have basically the rafters or poles that support the lines up above are going to run in the median of large expressways. So
Mhm.
the poles will be actually built in the median of a freeway or an expressway, and the gondolas are just going to run above ground.
Mhm.
So
But if
you're
you
actually gonna follow
you know if
pre-existing pathways.
if these African countries do not invest in other types of infrastructure for mass transit, what's going to happen is um, it's going to create this logjam where everybody wants to use this because of all the I guess the congestion on the
I mean,
highway.
I think that's
So
pure speculation at this point. I really do. That's
no,
like
I mean
that's like saying when Bird rolled out its micro transport service. Well, there's going to be such a log jam for everybody to go jump on a damn scooter. No one's going to take buses,
no,
and we
this
just didn't
no.
see that. We didn't
No,
see that.
what I'm saying is you're gonna have to make it. It's gonna. I'm just mentioning. That's no. I mean, I'm not saying that as a deterrent. I'm just saying that you're gonna have to. It's gonna have to cost at a premium in the sense that if you don't want to use the buses, you could always take the cable cars, but it would be extra. I mean, and that way you can kind of like
Well, that's part of the civic. That's
pull
part of
out
the
the
civic. That's part of the civic planning and all this.
yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like if you're gonna put a project together like this, and dude, I'm not even trying to come off as a dickish or anything, but it's kind of like, all right, these things are taken into consideration when you roll out a project like this. I'm applying for a grant right now, right? In that grant, there's a specific portion in that grant that pertains specifically to low income users, right? And what we would do to accommodate them. In order for you to roll something like this out as a public works project, you have to accommodate the public.
Mhm.
You don't just go in and go, yeah, we're gonna put a fucking gondola up. Oh yeah, and it's $10. If you can't afford it, fuck you. That's not how this is done.
Mhm.
It has to be developed in such a way where it says, okay, well, look, the gondola option is for those of you who are doing this, right? Because there's new costs involved in erecting something like this. See, so that means the early adopters are going to be the people who are okay with paying the premium. You
I
want
just,
the people who are going to pay for it to step on up.
and I just wanted to add something to it as well, that you're also talking about running fiber optic cable along that same line.
It's multi-purpose.
Yeah, it can be very multi-purpose. It can be also added, to um, low wave 5G, because 600 megahertz is actually the low last mile spec. And that's where this actually comes in. So there's multitude of multi-purposes of utilization you can get out of rolling out a system like this if you plan it out correctly. And so
Right.
the article is saying it already moved millions of people just in 2 years. That's a lot.
But what if it's moving? What if it's moving billions of gigabytes in data also?
Mm-hmm.
And what if it's producing 5G signal?
Mm-hmm.
Hell, what if you're able to also attach solar arrays or something along those lines, panels along it? I mean, it's space utilization, it's technology layering. You're talking about you're talking about three different industries that can actually split the cost on the construction of it. Because if you're gonna run data cable, fiber optic on it, in addition to just the regular gondola operations, and then there might also be some solar array or some sort of inverter line system that's running for energy collection. Okay, now you're talking about three partners coming in and splitting the cost on the development.
It's all public infrastructure at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's all public infrastructure. So whether you're running fiber optic cable down there, municipal 5G radios on there, radio towers on there, and the gondola itself as a transit system, it's all public infrastructure. So it's all within the budget. But like Complex is saying, you do share it with private party, and that actually does benefit them. Yeah, I think this is something that most African governments have not actually looked at. I kind of brought this up temporarily when I was there, and people were actually, saying, "Yeah, I actually didn't think about this before. Maybe we should think about." I didn't meet Paul Kagame himself. I know he was there, but I didn't get a chance to meet him. He's well protected for obvious reasons. But people had said, might come back next year, man, and make a presentation on this. This is something that they should probably be listening to.
Yeah, I mean, the more I think about it, the more it does make sense. And I guess I was looking at it from a different, from the perspective of being the main one. But yeah, I can see it definitely being as a compliment. Just like you said, to traverse across, the city or from just not necessarily making it. It just maybe you have a like a certain district of the city that people, maybe the entertainment district, or people can take, instead of taking the bus or whatever, they can choose. You can so it can help alleviate some pressures. But yeah, it makes sense. I mean, and there are a lot of people right now on the ground. It's just that those people are kind of the types to. I know I saw on Dinah's channel. It was one guy that was trying to get, I think it was John Cashin or something. He's working on a project, but a lot of those guys are just, it's one of those things where they're the middlemen, so they're trying to put the deal together to, and get the government to fork over the money, and that's just, that's another, headache in and of itself. But yeah, I'm on board. I think those are great ideas.
But LA's Uber is they're slated to be testing their drone service this year here in LA.
Mm-hmm.
So
Drone,
at some point, yeah. So yeah. So like I pull out my phone, right? And then I hit Uber, and instead of like a car or like a luxury SUV or like a scooter or something, I choose a drone. And like an EHong 184 personal drone will come pick me up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I have to be at a certain location, but yeah. They already there's already like a Uber subsidiary that does the same thing with helicopters. I think that's kind of like what they're going to be using to test this. But I mean, if Uber is already moving to do that, why is gondola so crazy of an idea?
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at it right now. Yeah. I don't know. I guess it'll be a lot of those just what floating through the sky and stuff like that. Is
Well, there. So personal drones are. So there's an airspace that they're zoned to fly in. I want to say it's in the same airspace as helicopters, or maybe right below the airspace of helicopters. So
Supposed to be
that's why.
500 feet.
Say that again, Mike.
It's supposed to be below 1,000 feet. And,
Yeah, something like that. Right. Yeah, they can't be up in any airspace where commercial or private or commercial airplanes fly.
uh-huh.
I think it's in the same airspace range with helicopters,
Okay.
like rotor vehicles, basically. So, I mean, look, dude, like everybody thinks we're crazy when we talk about all this type of shit, but like, this is just what's really going down right now, man. I'm sorry. Like, I mean, I'm not saying it to you, Ajisa. I'm just saying it like just
No, I feel
generally. Yeah, like
you.
like the tech rollout is going down.
And I kind of like, and hearing Mike talk, I can tell that he it's one of those things where I almost say to myself, man, I'd rather go and put all my eggs, not all, but just try to. It's almost like wildcatters back in the day. They or people that settled the West. When be one of those pioneers that what I'll go and try to you know
Bro, let me ask you something, man. Like, do you remember what things were like before the internet?
yeah.
No, I mean like
Yeah,
legit, like you had to like remember all your homies' phone numbers and
I
like
was a
just
kid. I was a kid. Yeah, I was a kid, but I remember my dad doing his papers on typewriters. I remember
right.
seeing
Yeah.
a word processor and stuff like that.
Yeah. See, you've been through this type of shift before.
Yeah.
Okay. So this isn't something that's not familiar to us. We just really didn't take notice of it because we were just kind of too busy being like, in our own little world, which is cool. Like that's what we do as individual people, right? We have our own lives that we're living, we got our own experiences and all that shit, right? But see, in the background, in the tapestry, dude, like there's like this whole other fucking like world that's going on. And there's these things called companies,
Yeah.
right? That have like technology and they got patents. And those companies also got investors. And those investors are looking for returns on their investments. You see, so there's a whole environment outside of our own little bubble, right? That's predicated upon tech competition, because one tech company is in competition with this company right here to get their shit out here first. So they're both pressuring legislators to pass laws and regulations to make business more favorable. See, that's all going on, dude. Like in the background. That's always going on all the time, 24/7, 365. Bet on it. See, so shit happens so quickly, and at the stroke of a pen, the passage of a law or a bill or something like that, game changer. Just like that.
Hey, Mike, I want to ask, when you were there, did you see, I guess, some uh, some Africans, be it whether they're from diaspora or they were from over here, with their not only going there as expats to work, but people with their own companies that were trying to, not representing a larger corporation, but with their own companies that were trying to break into the market. Did you
The
see any of that?
majority of the people there had their own startups. The majority of them.
Okay.
That's what it was. That's what it was for. So you had large corporations backing it, but they weren't frontline and center. The companies that were frontline and center were the startups. Most of them were Nigerian startups. They were frontline and center. Those brothers were out there. Those sisters were out there in full effect.
Where do you think the big companies find out what small companies to buy out?
If you look at the itinerary for the event, you'll see that they had a specific block set up for mega corporations or publicly traded corporations to work with startups in Africa. So it wasn't about making acquisitions or anything like that. It was about where to drive
Partnerships.
capital. Yeah, where do you drive the capital and investment? And
Okay.
partner with the startups so that they can do a lot of the work that you're not really experiencing as a.
And that might just be, and Mike, that just may be a continental narrative, right? Because oftentimes what we hear is that, oh, well, this country is just going to come in here, or these companies, they're just going to come in here and take advantage and do this, and that. And what you're telling me is that, well, no, there really isn't a buyout culture going on, but it's more of a partnership type of culture going on.
Yep. That's what they're talking about, partnership. So that's why the brother said
interesting
to be more synergies between African Americans and Africans on the continent. There needs to be.
You don't say.
And so because everybody can learn from each other.
Hey, Mike, was there any talk there of harnessing wind energy?
Yeah, renewable energies was a big discussion.
Okay.
Renewable energies is a big discussion. The only problem is that these big wind turbines actually do cause some issues in terms of how where it's implemented. In a place like Kenya, it would be difficult. I mean, in a place like Rwanda, it would be difficult, but somewhere like Kenya, that's closer to the shoreline, they can actually put that out in the water. In Rwanda, you don't really have that sort of space where you can just drop it off and it's not disrupting anything else that's in the environment.
I was going to say the one knock on windmills is that they are an environmental disruptor.
How?
So
how is that?
Because of where you place it, it can disrupt the ecosystem that it's around.
Not only that, dude, okay, if you go drive through the SoCal deserts, like if you're taking the 10 south going into Arizona, when you hit like Joshua Tree, all those areas down there, you just see wind farms for days. And you know what you also see? You see blades that are like hanging off and on the ground, which means that sometimes the winds get so hard that they literally destroy the blades on the windmill, and them shits come falling down. So guess what you don't want around all that shit? People, homes, shit like that. See, so you can really only kind of put these things in certain areas because of stuff like that.
Yeah, they're really IoT based. So if there are any sort of issues, they
signal off. It'll signal off when one goes down. Yeah,
it usually sends out a message. So, but the thing is, that sort of turbine is actually going to be impractical in a place like Rwanda, but in like Kenya or Egypt, where there's a lot of desert, they can actually put that there.
Right.
But vertical access wind turbines are actually the alternative, right? But they don't move as much energy as a prop based turbine. So a turbine would move something like gigawatts of power. If you have them in the series, they'll move gigawatts of power, whereas a vertical access turbine, they only move like in the megawatts. So
yeah, they don't capture as much.
It has to be paired with something in order.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't. It does, just on its own. It doesn't capture more kinetic energy than a propeller.
Okay, I see what they look like. I know what those are. I was wondering what those were. Yeah, but was there a talk about what to do with like, when you talk about renewable energy, like a lot of the waste, like just the from an environmental standpoint of how to recycle, because a lot of times these industrial cities don't really have a sewage type. They don't have any plans or any infrastructure to deal with the sewage or whatnot. But I think it's been shown like through pyrolysis, you can use those and create renewable energy through those. I wonder if people were talking about that.
Not too much. It was more about the high level than anything else. Not the biggest objective is to not rely on nuclear energy, right? So although nuclear energy provides a lot of sustainability, it actually could
No,
be.
no, no, not nuclear, but like if
I'm
you could take
saying that's what they were trying. That's what
They're trying to avoid it.
yeah, they're trying to avoid nuclear energy, right? So coal energy, coal production is not clean at all, right? But it's the only other alternative to that. You can always shut down a coal plant and not have to worry about the fallout after that. Whereas with nuclear, that was what they were trying to avoid. So renewable energies actually work in tandem with something else. It doesn't just work on its own.
yeah.
And so you would have to put up a lot of bread. I think Morocco has the largest renewable energy plant in on the continent, and that was no easy feat for them. So I can imagine what it does, in other places. I mean, they have a lot of desert space, so they have a whole lot of solar thermal mirrors that they can set up, to create that sort of energy.
And that's the whole thing. It's like if you don't really have anything else and you have the money, then you go ahead and you spring for something like that as the jump off.
Mm.
Then you supplement your energy production off of that. So you don't want to go just 100% reliant on renewables until you have the type of renewable energy portfolio where you've got redundancy after redundancy after redundancy covered as far as your energy supply needs are concerned. So until you get to that point, you're still looking at supplementing your energy with maybe some natural gas and other forms of energy. But your centerpiece is renewables. And as technology, and that's the thing, your centerpiece is there, and you're always looking at the next evolution of it. You're always looking at the advances of it. And not only that, but you're also investing in it because your energy portfolio is going to be maximized and hedged upon this. So you may also want to take an investment position in it as well. And it's not that's what I mean. It's like look, if when you ask those questions, in my head I process it like the energy minister, and you're asking me that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you're asking me that, I'm like, well, what the fuck? You think I'm just gonna sit up here and just, blow this shit and not figure out how to do this in such a way where not only am I able to establish a new infrastructure based on this technology, but also hedge for the future to be a developer and innovator in it because of our early adoption in it. If you start early in the game, if you're thinking smart about it, you're going to be one of the first people to learn a whole lot about it.
Mm.
That's when you start thinking, okay, you know what? Who's our education minister? Let's start putting some programs together to get people trained up. So in 2 to 3 years, once we get like the first round of this shit rolled out, we got people who can service this shit.
Hey Mike, how clean did Kigali look? I'm not how clean, but how did it look from? I know I saw the pictures you showed yesterday from your hotel room, but just from the outside walking around and stuff, how did it look?
It was impeccable. It was impeccable. I
showed the pictures.
Yeah, even in the United States, you don't see anything like that. It was impeccable. You didn't see any broken bottles. No, there was nothing of litter on the ground. Like I said before, I had litter. I had some paper, some tissues and stuff that I had from eating, and I actually didn't see a trash can nearby, so I carried that stuff with me to the hotel and threw it away at the hotel. That's how clean it was. Like the idea of throwing something out there was to me was pretty offensive. So I said, man, I have to take this stuff with me to the hotel, and that's how clean it was. I had to respect the environment that much. So I'm in Boston, and I don't see anything like that in any predominantly black neighborhood. You go to predominantly black neighborhoods, it smells like piss. People pee in the corner. Broken bottles because of people drinking and stuff like that. It was a cultural shock for me to see an environment that was supposed to be black and poor have that much cleanliness to it. it was impeccable. So definitely livable. I mean, not that you know you could drop a cheeseburger on the ground and pick it back up and eat it. I mean,
No, I'm not
all
saying that.
I'm saying is I didn't see any rats out there. That's how clean it was. I mean, I guess I'm assuming that the rats don't have anything to eat off of because there's nothing there. So I don't know what they do with the trash. To be quite honest with you, I'm still baffled by it. I don't know how it works, how the system works, but they seem to have figured it out. They seem to have a master plan.
And,
So,
and you don't,
Mike,
you
they
don't,
don't create trash.
and you don't feel that they were like, and I'm not, and no way I'm down. I'm just asking. You didn't get the sense that they were like kind of like putting on airs and like hiding their poor people, like Demolition Man, like all the poor people were living underground or somewhere. You didn't get that. You didn't get that feeling of this was just all presentation. You
no,
felt like all this was like naturally how things were.
no. When I come out in the morning to go to the conference, you see hundreds of people out there cleaning up. Um, that's their version of public works. And
Okay.
so they do a lot of manual labor. There is no automation out there. So there's a lot of manual labor that gets done. So you do see people out there with brooms and stuff like that and rakes and stuff like that that are spread all across the city. They're constantly cleaning up. So that's the point that I'm making, that there's a level of pride that they have about their environment. And if you go into people's houses, it's the same way. Even if they're poor, their house is very clean. You know, you go into some predominantly black areas in the United States, and I can tell you right now, some of these people's houses,
No, I definitely
Child
feel you.
protective services is and public health works are right up in there. So
Do you, as far as landmass, how big of a city do you think Kigali is? What does it compare to?
I would say
Like,
probably in comparison to something like Boston.
as far as landmass, you think it's about the same size?
Yeah, I would say something like that.
Oh, okay.
Boston is about what 6.4 miles. I would say it's roughly around that.
Oh, okay.
Boston is artificially made, so keep that in mind. It's all artificially made.
Oh, wow. Um, and oh, so he got rid of the French language. Are people there multilingual now, or they just speak English,
They
or there's some people that
very much multilingual in dialect. So there's a little bit of French, and then there's a little bit of dialect on the ground. It's
so
like
you can still hear French.
you can still hear French, but it's kind of like Jamaican patois. So it's very, very similar to that.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah, big ups to Paul Kagame, man. We need to figure out a way to clone him and send him to all 53 other countries. You know.
No, I think they're borrowing from his template. I think they're borrowing from it. Other countries are going to be slower to adopt, but he has a template, and I think some countries are really looking to adopt it.
You gotta, yeah, and it's we gotta stop the Jesus complex, right? Like, yeah, he's
Oh
well,
no,
what I'm saying is we don't
yeah.
need to clone him, because the fact of the matter is that
It was
when you
just
have,
it was just tongue in cheek, but yeah, no.
No,
well,
the Messiah complex, yeah, that
yeah, I mean,
he's
I'm
very unique to the environment itself, and so there's some things that you can borrow, and there's some things that are just not interchangeable. And I think that the way he's running the country is actually acceptable. People are actually okay with it. They don't. I've heard nobody complain. People actually like it. So um, maybe if you go to Ghana or something like that, they may have a different perspective. Um,
right, but I think what really what we have to go on the assumption of is how the scope of, one, technology, and two, the fact that the majority of Africans are young.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, they're young.
Mhm.
So again, we have to get out of the habit of looking at everything as it is right now.
Mhm.
Okay, what you do is when you're looking at things right now, you look at the things that point towards the future, right? Your right now indicators that say, oh, in the future it's going to look like that. See, that's how we got to do this. And when I look at the continent, and when I look at the fact that the majority of the people are young, I mean, do you see the cultural exchanges that happen through technology? A lot of like dance video clips that become viral here in the States and over in Europe. And then like, and in those videos, you see people rocking fashions and shit that came out of New York, came out of LA, came out of Atlanta, came out of wherever, London. And you see it there. You see the exchange. It's already, that's what I mean. It's like, dude, I don't see why there's a question.
Yeah,
We already see proof of the cultural exchanges already happening.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
a
Mike.
lot of young black males over there rocking Vans and what do you call the other skaterboard sneakers?
Come on, dog.
Yeah, I didn't see
Really?
I didn't see too many skateboards out there, but there was definitely some of those. You did see the westernized African American male in a lot of those East African.
Yeah, the influences.
Yeah,
See the influence.
Yeah.
same thing with the women too. The women, Black American women have a very, very broad reach with their cultural influence.
They really
You don't
do.
realize that.
You didn't see the hair pieces, did you?
You see all of it. You see the attitude, the swagger. It's all there. It's all there. They're copying Black American women. They like it for whatever.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's debatable, it's subjective, but I see why they're doing it, because Black women have such a broad outreach with media, especially with YouTube now. Everybody can see what's going on. Although some videos are blocked in Africa that you can't see, that happens out west. For the most part, they still see love and hip hop and whatnot.
Yeah, I think you said it yesterday. Either you or Complex said it, that don't go there and bring the negative aspect of our culture over there.
Fuck no.
Yeah, I think
No.
Complex said it
Yeah,
yesterday.
dude. That's like, that's the worst thing you can do, man, is you go to somewhere else and you bring the absolute worst of your cultural exchange value.
Yeah.
That's like the worst thing you can do, man. It's like when you go abroad, dude, you're supposed to leave all the dumb shit behind.
I came to educate people. So that was my perspective, was to come educate them on what goes on in the West from a cultural perspective. And the game that was dropping on them, people were, had their mouth open, like, yo, that's really how it goes down. And it was like, yeah, we didn't know that. We didn't know all of that was happening. See, to them, the West is all about milk and honey.
Yeah.
They don't understand that racism, the power of racism and a lot of the redlining and the historical aspect behind it. They don't understand that. So
and they never will. They never can until they actually kind of experience themselves. Because why do you think when the colonizer goes over there, he's treated like a god? Because all they see is the accoutrements that he brings. They think they don't. Maybe like you and I can see behind that smile, and we know there's dubious intentions, but all they can see is that smile, that the warmth and the welcomeness, and they think like, yeah, this guy's a godsend. But I don't think it's something. They'd have to experience it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, but as long as they stay there, they'll never know. So somebody has to tell them. So, all right, but I'm gonna be up out of here, man. Shalom, everyone.